LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the November 15th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Today I'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which should be really educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. I'm starting a little late tonight because I spent some time watching the closing arguments in the case against Kyle Rittenhouse. Also, I've been traveling the last few days. When I talk about COVID, I'll talk about the few days I spent in Houston, Texas. But my main topic is Biden economy, good or bad. The inflation numbers came out and they look pretty bad. I'll be talking about that, although one thing you have to know about the inflation numbers is, and you'll see this later in one of the NBC News clips, here's a screenshot of it, inflation's up 6.2%, but on average wages are up 4.9%. So you do the math, that means for the average worker getting 4.9% wage increase, that's only 1.3% inflation. So keep that in mind when you watch all these inflation stories. I'll back up the news summaries from all five. Well, I'll juxtapose the news summaries from all five of the big corporate outlets, followed by newsmaker interview clips from all five of the corporate outlets. Two of senior Biden advisor Brian Dees, one clip of Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen, and those will be on my main topic about the economy. But I also have a clip of Surgeon General Vivek Murthy answering some anti-vaccine rhetoric from Fox News and Fox News Sunday, and then finally Senator John Barrasso giving the George Stephanopoulos the cross-examination runaround of the week. That's what I'll finish up the show with, other than, of course, the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the fans of my dog Sandy and my cat Dash out there. Before I get to all that, on my main topic, I found this morning a political comedy clip. I think it's comedic the way that the supposedly straight Fox News anchor Trace Gallagher and supposed business economics expert from the Fox Business Channel, Maria Bartiromo, they discuss, if you look closely at the bottom of the screen, there's a little chyron. It's like one of the labels that Fox News uses for its bias. It's Inflation Nation. I'm not going to give away what the big bias is, but I'll show you why I think this is. I've actually been thinking I should start making Fox News bias videos again, because the bias is worse than it's ever been. It's like all day, every day. I could make a Fox News bias clip of the day and just do a live stream on it every day. But anyway, I'll talk more about, I'll talk more about the bias in this Fox News. This is from America's Newsroom this morning on Monday. And it shows a couple of the clips, or at least it shows a clip of senior Biden advisor Brian Dees, cuts out an important part, and does not inform you on what really causes inflation, despite supposedly being straight news and having the business economics expert. I guess I did pre-criticize the clip, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch together.
You talk about doubling down, Maria. I just want to play some of this sound of the administration members there talking about how this Build Back Better plan is really it's really the elixir for inflation. Watch this.
If you care about, making sure that we ease inflation in the upcoming months, in the future, voting for this, the Build Back Better Act, is the way to go.
This bill is fully paid for. It's not going to add to inflationary pressures, quite the opposite.
Build Back Better bill that we are working to move forward will not add to inflationary pressure and will ease inflationary pressure over the long term.
The theme here is you just print up a couple of $1 trillion and it takes this inflation thing all the way, Maria.
Yeah, Trace, these are all very uninformed comments. Clearly we know that inflation is only going to get stoked further by more dollars, more money being thrown at this economy. And I'll also point out this, because of all of the free money being thrown at people as a result of the COVID legislation back in March, people have dropped out of the workforce, and it is increasingly tough for companies to fill those jobs 4.4 million people have dropped out of the workforce in the month of September. That is a huge number, and that tells you that these policies are not only creating what they're saying is temporary situation, costing us all so much more money, but it is also creating a fundamental structural change in the workforce. People are dropping out of the workforce. They're expecting free money. It will make us less productive.
Expecting free money. I mean, that part at the end, that's not even the main bias I wanted to show from there, but this is also a talking point that somehow the fact that people are quitting their jobs, and they go on in that clip to talk about how people are quitting their jobs because they're lazy and they're throwing free money. That, I mean, the extra unemployment benefits ran out over a month ago. So that doesn't even make sense. And notice how, and this goes back to the inflation versus wages. When inflation goes up, that means businesses are charging more for their goods. You know, that's a huge problem. But wages going up, or people quitting their jobs because they want to get better jobs, that's like labor charging more. But that's like a huge crisis. And it's, I mean, they're both. Why shouldn't labor get a better price for what they're offering? And if just like the businesses can get better prices for their goods when people are willing to pay more. And of course, they also talked about how they're printing up trillions of dollars, but they don't even address what Brian D. said, that it's the Biden senior advisor, that it's totally paid for. And that's the thing. No matter how much money the government spends and puts that money into the economy, if it takes out the same amount of money in taxes, that is not inherently inflationary. The Build Back Better bill that they're talking about, if you remember, Joe Manchin apparently claimed that it's going to they're going to spend $1.75 trillion, but it's actually going to bring in 1.95. So that it's actually going to lower the debt. Now, I said that it's not inherently inflationary to spend money if you take the same amount in taxes. Now, it could cause inflation. Like, suppose the government decided to spend like $1 trillion on hammers. That would definitely drive up the price of hammers, even if they paid for it all with taxes, because there'd be a shortage of hammers all of a sudden. That, you know, the market would respond by a whole bunch of new people starting to make hammers, and then the price would come back down. And what you're looking at, a lot of what the Build Back Better plan, and it's the Build Back Better and Jobs Act or whatever, and it's paying more for good union jobs, so that what that means, it's going to raise wages. That's what happens if the government starts spending a lot more, and also with the infrastructure bill on like good union jobs, replacing lead pipes or building roads and bridges. That you know, even though it's not inherently inflationary, if you take the same amount of money out of the economy in taxes, if it's going to have some specific effect, like buying $1 trillion worth of hammers, what they're buying a lot of is labor from blue-collar workers. So that's going to inflate wages. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. And like I said, Maria Bartiromo is supposed to be an expert. Trace Gallagher is a supposedly straight news anchor, and they're just like yucking it up about Inflation Nation and spreading misinformation. And by the way, when you get to that Brian D's clip, not only does he say it's totally paid for, he says it's totally paid for by taxing big corporations and the rich, which is incredibly popular, which is why I assume it was cut out of that Fox News bias clip. That, anyway, I could do that all day, every day with Fox News, even on their supposedly straight news programs. But now, anyway, I want to get to the news summaries from longest to shortest, juxtaposing all 5 of the news programs. And I'm going to start with the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, talking about good news on jobs and the economy a month ago, now being replaced with this inflation news. And that's the introduction. But then the pre-recorded package is actually about the backlash against Republicans for voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the few Republicans in the House of Representatives. I think it was 13 in the House of Representatives, and then 19 senators voted for it. And then you'll see a whole thing about Trump and some bad information that's come out about the Republican Party and Donald Trump's callousness for the hang Mike Pence chance, which will, like I said, will come up. I told you the last clip is that George Stephanopoulos cross-examination runaround, which is where he tries to get a Republican Senator, John Barrasso, to condemn Trump, saying that the hang Mike Pence chants were common sense, which you will first see in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary that I think I've over-introduced and pre-criticized. Well, I haven't really criticized it yet, but I'll maybe criticize it a little after we watch it together over here.
And a good Sunday morning. Just when Democrats thought it was safe to brag about the economy after that healthy jobs report in October, the passage, finally, of the popular bipartisan infrastructure bill, along came word that inflation had surged 6.2% in October, the largest increase in 31 years. Not only could the inflation spike make it harder for Democrats to pass their $1.75 trillion social spending bill, as Joe Manchin has been hinting at, but it also calls into question whether the Biden administration has a handle on this problem after insisting, frankly, for months that the inflation would likely be moderating by now. It obviously is not. And just when Republicans, by the way, thought it was going to be safe to look forward to a united party heading into the 2022 midterms after their successes in 2021 last week, a nasty skirmish has broken out. The 13 Republican House members whose votes did help pass the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill have received profanity-laced messages and death threats from some conservative voters. So why the anger over the kind of bill, infrastructure, roads and bridges, that normally produces bipartisan support? Because President Biden, who will sign the bill tomorrow, might benefit politically. That's why, at least that's what the former president fears. And that's where we're going to start this morning, with our increasingly dysfunctional Congress, dysfunctional politics, which is driving people to want to leave Washington or simply not run at all.
Ugly time, a toxic time, and really unfortunate because it's not what we stand for as a democracy.
This week's GOP-led backlash over the vote to fund roads, bridges, and broadband is just the latest, as a portion of the Republican Party sees threats of political violence as a legitimate part of their partisan struggle.
We always have a difference of ideas, but these ideas should not be leading to violence.
House Republicans who voted for the bill have been flooded with angry messages, called traitors, told to rot in hell, and delivered death threats, like this one to Michigan Congressman Fred Upton.
Traitor. That's what you are. You're a piece of traitor. I hope you die. I hope everybody in your family dies.
It's a bill 19 Republican senators also voted for, including Senators Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell.
I was delighted that the House finally found a way to pass the infrastructure bill last week.
But on Monday night, at an official dinner raising money for House Republicans, former President Trump went on an angry tirade.
No thank you goes to those in the House and Senate who voted for the Democrats' non-infrastructure bill, also known as the Democrat presidential re-election bill.
Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene posted the office phone numbers of the 13 House Republicans online.
To say that a bill is right for your district, right for your state, and that something you helped write, but then you got to vote against it because you want to give the other side a victory, that is a sign of what's broken.
Threats against members of Congress had doubled when last measured in May, according to the Capitol Police. Some of those threats are coming from inside the House. This week, Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar shared an animated video showing him killing New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and swinging swords at President Biden. And Republican leaders have been slow to condemn the attack on the Capitol, taking their cues from the former president.
Because it's common sense, John. It's common sense that you're supposed to protect. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right? Yeah. How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
We are also confronting a domestic threat aided by political leaders who have made themselves willing hostages to this dangerous and irrational man.
Now many in the party are adopting former President Trump's violent language. From Republican leaders,
I want you to watch Nancy Pelosi hand me that gun. It'll be hard not to hit her with it, but I will bang it down.
To the conservative grassroots, a Reuters investigation documented nearly 800 intimidating messages to election officials in 12 states.
Tell the truth or your 3 kids will be fatally shot. Let's be clear. This is domestic terrorism.
The bitterness in Washington is just one reason New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, a top Senate recruit, took a pass.
I've been criticizing Washington for a long time, and I guess I was right.
Well, joining me now is Governor Chris Sununu of New Hampshire. Governor Sununu, welcome to...
And, you know, at the very end of the news summary, they have Chris Sununu as part of the news summary as one of the people, a newsmaker who is showing the point they're making about Republicans not wanting to get into the, you know, negative Republican whirlwind where people get criticized for voting for bipartisan infrastructure bills. But I don't know if Governor Sununu is that important. It's one of the biases I talk about in the media is they always have a bias for their exclusive guests, and Governor Sununu was an exclusive guest, so they worked him into the news summary. But it was, I thought, an interesting editorial choice to start off with the economic story, and which seems to be the big story right now, and the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better, and it was all sort of like crowded together in Chuck Todd's live introduction that he always does, and then he went to this pre-recorded package that was all about, you know, the rising violence in the Republican, or violent language, and irrational, you know, the hang Mike Pence's common sense, and the Marjorie Taylor Greene helping target the 13 Republicans who voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the House of Representatives by tweeting out their office numbers so that they could get those death threats. And that was reported on pretty widely on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. I'm not sure it deserved to be in the news summary, but actually a lot of the things I'm seeing makes me think that January 6th might be not the last type of right-wing violence we see around election results, and maybe NBC News and Chuck Todd there are showing us an important warning for the future. You can let me know what you think in the comments section. I did see that I got a super chat contribution about my pre-criticism of the clip, though I did some post-criticism there, but thank you, Matthew, for that. I saw someone in the live chat asking why there were super chat comments. It's one of several ways to support me continuing to make my videos. I've also put links down in the video description to my Patreon page where Patreon patrons help me out monthly, and then there's also the possibility to give one-time direct PayPal contributions if you like what I'm doing and you want me to keep doing it. I've talked about how I'm going to keep doing it through the end of 2021 and then reassess. One of the ideas I've had, I was talking about at the beginning, about maybe doing like random live streams during the week pointing out the Fox News bias clip of the day, because I could basically do multiple videos. I could even maybe pick out like top 3 best Fox News bias clips of the day and just show up and do a live stream sometime during the week, instead of doing the Sunday shows on Sunday or late on Monday or whatever. But I don't know what people think about that. You can let me know about that too in the comment section, and whether that's something you want to support. And if I did those type of shorter videos, you know, I know a lot of people don't want to commit to watching an hour plus video, and I often get comments like, you know, why don't you do your shorter edited videos? And that's another possibility too, because like I said, Fox News bias is so much worse than it ever has been. They've like given up any pretense there. I mean, what that was like a Fox News anchor, supposedly straight news anchor, and their like business economics expert just totally giving you false propaganda about how how markets are supposed to work in terms of inflation. And anyway, I already talked about that. But anyway, I've gone off on a big digression. Now I'm going to show you the next 2 longest news summary. This is from CBS News Face the Nation, where Mark Strassmann is not reporting from Atlanta. You'll never guess where Mark Strassmann is. You'll never guess where Mark Strassmann reported on, you know, it's basically the same. Oh, the one other criticism I have of the NBC News Meet the Press news summary is they didn't show this screenshot that they showed later, talking to Brian Dees, and it's really important, like I said, if wages are going up 4.9% on average, the 6.2% inflation means only 1.3% loss in buying power, which is under the 2%, which is considered normal inflation. But that's a criticism, and that's also my criticism of the Margaret Brennan introduction and then Mark Strassmann discussion of, I mean, they talk about wages slightly, and where's Mark Strassmann? Well, let's find out over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Progress in our slow march back to normal seems to be a continuing series of starts and stops, and there's a lot of confusion about where we are headed. Most Sundays, we start the broadcast with a look at what's going on that you need to know, and today's no exception. But one thing that's different is our Mark Strassmann is actually here in person. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Great to see you in person.
So there were a lot of conflicting signals on the economy. What can you tell us?
There's some fundamental disconnects going on with the economy, right, between what it is we're all looking to buy versus what's available on store shelves. That's number one. Number two, if people have money in the bank, but they still feel financially vulnerable. And then there's this constant battle with sticker shock.
Econ 101 in late 2021, when demand dwarfs supply and supply chains are bottlenecked, prices explode. Inflation's peak surge in 3 decades.
There aren't enough truck drivers, there aren't enough trucks, all the way along. It's just kind of a hot mess this year.
The Consumer Price Index, what we pay for goods and services year to year, jumped 6.2% in October. Broad-based and eye-popping, the biggest surge since 1991. New car prices up 9%. Used cars and trucks, astonishingly, up 26%. Gas, 50%. Heating oils climbed almost 60% with temperatures dropping. And food basics, eggs up 12%, bacon up 20%. You quickly see why inflation is now chewing into the president's popularity.
Many people remain unsettled about the economy, and we all know why.
With pandemic restrictions loosened, consumer demand has roared back. Millions of families with stockpiled savings want to spend.
2 pallets worth Arctic Animals by Magnetiles. Love it.
And merchants want to sell. But supply chains from the ports to the highways remain knotted. Among the worried, U.S. turkey farmers. It's less than 2 weeks before their Super Bowl.
Everything in the last couple of years has been a little more challenging, even down to boxes.
Help wanted, another sign fueling inflation. We've become a nation of quitters. More than 4 million more workers resigned in September. The U.S. Labor Department reports 10.4 million job openings. Economists disagree whether this inflation will worsen and about the potential impact of trillions in government spending. The infrastructure bill, the social spending bill, on top of all that pandemic relief. Inflation pressures the Fed, with rates now triple the average 2% gains it aims for annually. And with last month's Gallup poll, nearly 70% of Americans believe the economy's getting worse. There's also pressure on a president pushing for Washington to spend more.
So, again, the irony is with more money in the bank, millions of Americans are better off, but they don't feel it, and nor do they believe, Margaret, that anyone has a plan for getting inflation under control. And many, if not most people, believe the economy is going to get worse before it gets better.
All important consumer psychology. Mark Strassmann, thank you so much for being here.
Bet.
On Friday, we went to the Treasury Department here in Washington and sat down with Secretary Janet Yellen.
And I will have a clip of Janet Yellen coming up. But, you know, one thing I noticed watching that clip for the third time, you know, I watched the clips 3 times, once when I watched the show, once when I capture the clip, and then a third time when I watch it with all of you. I noticed that Mark Strassmann's report had, like, sort of a subtler version of both of the biases from that first Fox News political comedy clip I showed you. There was the Nation of Quitters thing. You saw the whole Maria Bartiromo, that the Great Resignation, as some people are calling it, that where workers are actually beginning to have some power. That's why wages are going up. That's a bad thing. That was kind of in the Mark Strassmann report. And then he talked about all that spending making people more worried about inflation. And he talked about the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better bill, which are actually paid for, or almost completely paid for. The infrastructure bill is almost completely paid for, and the Build Back Better bill, if Joe Manchin gets his way, will actually bring in more revenue than they're spending. So we're waiting for the CBO scores on that, but that was totally that was also kind of misrepresented in the Mark Strassmann news summary there, which there were a lot of times when I've talked about CBS being kind of Fox News light in some ways, that they do kind of have that same bias. Just there's no question CBS News is actually a journalistic organization like the CBS and ABC and NBC and CNN all actually are journalistic organizations compared to, of course, Fox News, which sometimes they accidentally commit some journalism. But if you read Gabriel Sherman's Loudest Voice in the Room, you know, Roger Ailes actually created it to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, and they still are definitely fulfilling that role, even though Chris Wallace does better than a lot of them, although I do show his bias on occasion as well. But CBS, they seem to have that same Fox News bias in just a little bit subtler way, and they did, prominently show all those things that are going up with inflation, and they showed the 6.2% inflation rate that was so scary, but of course did not show the 4.9% increase in wages, which really makes a difference in how you view that inflation, especially if you don't look at the increase in the power of labor as a bad thing for the economy, which it's not. So that's the point I wanted to make there. And now I'm going to go to the Fox News Sunday news summary, which for some reason they focus on the spike in COVID, which is really the usually what CBS does, focus more on COVID. And it's kind of weird that Fox News never really focused on that when Trump was in office. They would usually try to downplay COVID. In clips that I'm not showing, there was like Scott Gottlieb over on CBS News Face the Nation. There seems to be some possibility of a fifth wave. And based on the behavior I saw of people in Houston, Texas, when I had to go there for a family wedding over the weekend, I would not be surprised that if that's the way that people are acting in, Republican-controlled areas, it's just so much needless death because of the partisan divide on the pandemic and the need for vaccination and masking and social distancing until the numbers come in. There's still over 1,000 people dying every day in the United States. That's like a 9/11 every 3 days. So I can't really criticize Fox News for focusing on it, but they focus on it in a way where it's like Biden's fault. And also at the end, they sort of throw in the inflation and infrastructure thing in a way that is spun against Biden by David Spunt. But he does have Spun in his name, which maybe that's why Fox News hired him. I don't know. You can let me know what you think after you watch that third of the 5 news summaries over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. There's a new spike in COVID cases across the country, just as a federal appeals court has blocked one of the main ways President Biden wants to fight the virus. The court ruled for the second time against a new administration rule that businesses with more than 100 workers must mandate vaccines or weekly tests or face thousands of dollars in fines. The court says the rule grossly exceeds the government's authority and rejects the argument stopping the mandate could cost dozens or even hundreds of lives per day. In a moment, we'll speak with the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and we'll get reaction from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who's suing the administration. But first, let's bring in David Spunt at the White House with the latest on the administration's fight against COVID and against its critics. David.
Chris, during his first few months in office, President Biden pushed back against vaccine mandates, but COVID infections rose, and that all changed. The Biden White House receiving another blow from a federal court, halting the vaccine and testing requirements pending review. A judge on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, in an opinion late Friday, wrote, "The public interest is also served by maintaining our constitutional structure and maintaining the liberty of individuals to make intensely personal decisions according to their own convictions, even particularly when those decisions frustrate government officials." White House officials insist the mandate is literally a lifesaver.
We're confident in our authority to protect American workers as this virus is killing approximately 1,100 Americans a day.
The Department of Justice prepared to fight all the way to the Supreme Court, writing in part, the department will continue to vigorously defend the standard and looks forward to obtaining a definitive resolution following consolidation of all the pending cases for further review. Add the mandate loss in federal court to a growing list of supply chain issues and the highest inflation rate in 30 years, and it spells trouble ahead for a president not even a year into his term.
Even though wages are going up, we still face challenges and we have to tackle them. We have to tackle them head on.
Tomorrow, President Biden will sign the bipartisan infrastructure package into law. Chris, then he'll head out on the road in Michigan and New Hampshire to tout the plan. Chris?
David Spunt reporting from the White House. David, thanks. And joining us now, U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek.
And I will have a clip of Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, including him responding to, like I said, some Fox News biased talking points about how, you know, the cops and the National Guard and the border agents who don't want vaccine mandates, if they all quit, then isn't that bad for public safety? Worse than the public safety problem caused by COVID? And he'll also ask him about the Aaron Rodgers and the need for personal freedom. And you notice in that they focused a lot on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals putting a stay on the OSHA rule. They call it, you know, it's a vaccine mandate, but it's actually a mandate that is either employees get vaccinated or are tested weekly. The same rule that they have at Fox News, by the way, although I think they actually have to be tested more frequently at Fox News. And the thing about that OSHA ruling from the Fifth Circuit, I don't know how many times I heard rulings from the Ninth Circuit called the liberal Ninth Circuit, but the Fifth Circuit is actually a really conservative circuit. It should be the conservative Fifth Circuit, and they had like very small print Judge Carl Engelhardt. Every time I saw a ruling from an appeals court go against Trump, or not every time, but the regular practice at Fox News was to say an Obama-appointed judge, or if it was like, or how, whether it was a Democratic-appointed judge or who the president who appointed the judge was. They don't tell you that the judge who wrote that opinion, Carl Engelhardt, Trump-appointed judge in a very conservative circuit. Of course, the Supreme Court itself is a 6-3 conservative majority, so that doesn't mean that Judge Carl Engelhardt will be overturned, but it's a fact that Fox News didn't give you there. And then you saw the spin at the end about inflation with, of course, not talking about the increase in wages, but that seems to be a problem in a lot of the news summaries. Now I'm going to get to the two shorter news summaries, just a little over a minute from CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper maybe gets the Billy Joel "We Didn't Start the Fire" award this year for this week for mentioning the most topics in the shortest period of time, a little over a minute. CNN State of the Union yesterday that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is watching economic anxiety grow. President Biden will celebrate a victory tomorrow, signing the new bipartisan infrastructure bill into law. But as the president heralds this accomplishment, one that a significant majority of the American people support, he has also been running into a new economic reality, inflation, as prices in the U.S. surge more than they have in 30 years, according to new data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And as the holidays approach, Americans are seeing higher prices on everything from gas to groceries. This week, the president changed his message on the issue, acknowledging for the first time inflation is, quote, worrisome and, quote, one of the most pressing economic concerns of the American people, a response perhaps to the political reality. A brand new poll from the Washington Post ABC News shows Biden's approval rating sinking to 41%, a new low, largely because of a negative shift among Democrats and independents, as 70% of the American people, according to this poll, rate the economy negatively. 70%. 63% of the American people think Biden has not accomplished much so far. Joining us now to discuss, top economic advisor to President Biden, Brian Dees. Brian, thanks for...
Oh, and I will have the Brian Dees clip. I don't know, maybe there weren't as many topics as I had thought. It was, I guess, economic anxiety, the infrastructure bill, inflation, the supply chain, and then the bad poll numbers. And you're going to see the bad poll numbers are actually the main topic of the shortest of the news summaries from George Stephanopoulos, because it was an ABC Washington Post poll. Though, I guess Jake Tapper's news summary gets that same criticism that talked about the inflation, but not the increase in wages, which makes a big difference if, prices go up 6.2%, but you have 4.9% more pay, as I've said over and over again already. But I want to finish juxtaposing the news summaries with the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which I already pre-criticized, Matthew, like my best pre-criticism, because I talked about how it focuses on the poll numbers. And you remember a few weeks back I was criticizing Fox News for talking about this outlier poll that had Joe Biden's approval rating down to, I think it was Quinnipiac, down to 38%. Well, this week it's like historic low, but it's historic low in the Washington Post ABC poll, 41% approval rating. But if there are actually some good internals, especially in terms of the infrastructure package that he's about to go around the country selling, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. We're coming on the air this morning with a brand new poll, and it's brutal for President Biden. His approval rating has hit a new low. Only 41% of Americans think he's doing a good job in office. 53% disapprove. 70% believe the economy is in bad shape. And with inflation at a 3-decade high, only 39% approve of Biden's handling of the economy. Looking ahead to the midterm elections, Republicans have a 10-point lead among registered voters, their largest lead ever in the 40-year history of our poll. One bright spot for the president, his core policies are popular. 63% support the $1 trillion infrastructure bill he's going to sign into law tomorrow, and 58% support the $2 trillion social investment and climate initiative he's pushing for right now. And we begin this morning with the head of the National Economic Council at the White House, Brian Dees. Brian, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's begin with...
And actually, I don't have the Brian Dees clip from ABC because I'm showing the using George Stephanopoulos' cross-examination runaround of the week clip with Senator John Barrasso instead. But I do have 2 Brian Dees clips coming up. Like I said, there was that one bright spot on what the infrastructure bill that passed, and then the Build Back Better bill that is probably going to pass. Both are wildly popular in terms, there aren't many things that get 63 or 58% or whatever it was approval rating in polls, and people feel bad about the economy, but it's still a year out, and Republicans have that historic 10-point lead in congressional preference. But there's plenty of time, assuming things get better, which, it's Biden's economy, whether some of his problems are inherited or not. He's going to get credit, he's going to get blame in the midterms. And actually, the Janet Yellen clip I'm going to show coming up after the 2 Brian Dees clips talk specifically about whether things are going to be better in the midterms. Because if you look at what I was talking about, good internals, you see how a lot of Americans have a bad view of the economy right now and are worried about inflation and prefer the Republicans because of that. But they also like these bills, and if these bills, the infrastructure bill is already passed, and then the Build Back Better bill, if it also passes and the economy gets better, because some of the inflation is transitory, and it's especially if COVID comes under control. that's sort of the underlying theme you've heard in some of these clips. If the economy is the strength of the economy in a lot of ways is based on COVID. I mean, there could be external events like the Chinese debt crisis, or who knows, all sorts of things could happen in the next year. But there's plenty of time for Americans' view of the economy to get better. They do have a lot of money. They do, in some ways, workers have a lot more power, and those are the signs that things a year from now, if those internals about how Americans view the economy a year from now are a lot better, and they like the major accomplishments of the Biden administration, then that could change the preference for Republicans over Democrats. Anyway, that's sort of a long-winded discussion of the bad numbers and how they could get better a year from now. Now I want to get to the four newsmaker clips. First, the two Brian Dees clips dealing with the question of inflation. This first one is from CNN State of the Union, Jake Tapper, and I specifically wanted to show you this clip because it's the longer version, much longer, it's like 4 minutes long, of the very brief clip they showed of Brian Dees in the political comedy Trace Gallagher Maria Bartiromo clip I started the live stream with. And you'll see the part they cut off Brian Dees mid-sentence before he talked about how the Build Back Better bill is totally paid for, and it's paid for by raising taxes on the rich and large corporations. And they cut out the raising taxes on the rich and large corporations part because it's wildly popular. And I think he does a good job of talking about making the talking points that are beneficial to the Biden administration on some tough economic issues. And then I'm going to stop the clip before Jake Tapper asks the question that, or as Jake Tapper asks the question that is the same question that Chuck Todd asked Brian Dees in the clip I'm going to show afterwards. But anyway, I will talk about all of that a little more after we watch Brian Dees giving the administration talking points on how they're fighting inflation over in this clip.
So let's start on this dire inflation report. Take a look at how much prices have risen over the last year. Regular gas prices up more than 50%, utility gas 28%, used cars, beef, pork, eggs, all up. This new Washington Post poll shows 70% of those polled view the economy negatively, 38% say the economy is in poor condition. How concerned are you and the president about inflation, and what specifically are you doing to fix it?
Well, inflation is high right now, and it is affecting consumers in their pocketbook and also in their outlook for the economy. But those concerns underscore why it's so important that we move forward on the Build Back Better legislation, this legislation that the House is going to consider this week. This, more than anything, will go at the costs that Americans face. You talk about healthcare, one of the biggest costs that American families face. This will lower prescription drug prices, put a cap on prescription drug costs for our seniors. Childcare, not only a big cost driver for families, but a big impediment for more parents and women to get back into the workforce. This bill will cut the cost of childcare by more than half for most working families. And housing, too, a big cost driver for families. This bill will build affordable homes all around the country to make it easier for families to afford housing and also to move to places where the job opportunities are. All of these things go right at lowering costs for American families, and this bill is fully paid for. It's not going to add to inflationary pressures, quite the opposite, because we're going to pay for everything in this bill by raising taxes on big companies, large corporations, and the highest income Americans. So there's an urgency to act. The House is going to consider this bill this week, and we're looking forward to making progress in getting this done.
Right, but nothing you just mentioned, assuming that everything you're saying is accurate and comes to pass the way you want, nothing you mentioned would bring down grocery prices, would bring down gas prices. For instance, let's just take gas prices for a second. Is President Biden willing to open the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Is he willing to stop gas and oil exports so as to alleviate the gas price issue at the pump?
Well, we are very committed to do everything that we can to make sure that American consumers don't bear the brunt of high gas prices and volatile energy prices. And the president has made clear that all options are on the table. We're monitoring this situation very carefully. One of the things that we're really focused on right now is making sure that American consumers don't actually get taken advantage of. One of the things that we've seen in oil and gas markets is because of consolidation, we have fewer large companies actually controlling the market. And so at moments like this, there's a real concern of price gouging or market manipulation that could put consumers could actually harm consumers. So we've asked the Federal Trade Commission to take a very close look at that right now in the current market conditions. And we're also engaging internationally with our counterparts to make sure that other oil-producing nations are not taking advantage of the strength of the recovery and actually profiting at the American consumer's expense. So all those issues are on the table, including Strategic Petroleum Reserve. We're monitoring that closely, and we'll continue to do so.
So, Brian, you saw the bad poll numbers for the president when it comes to the economy. I don't know how much of a factor this was, but President Biden finally publicly acknowledged inflation is worrisome this week. I want to play some sound of what you and President Biden were saying a few months ago in June.
By the way, talk of inflation. The overwhelming consensus is going to pop up a little bit and then go back down. No one's talking about this great, to
the degree that people are focused on inflationary pressures in the short term, that really is not the issue.
Do you think that you and the president were wrong and inflation is not a short-term pop up a little bit and then go back down issue?
No, I don't think so, Jake. I think.
And what he talks about there is COVID, and I'll show him basically giving the same answer to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press, because those clips that Jake Tapper was showing to Brian Dees actually are like from that little window where they like took off. It seemed like COVID was over, or the federal government like took off the mask mandate for vaccinated individuals. And I remember the grocery stores here in California for like a couple weeks, and from mid to late June, and then by like July 4th there was the fourth wave started coming from the Delta variant, and of course that caused a problem with the supply chain and problems with the economy. And so it's kind of a dumb question, and you'll see when Chuck Todd asks the same question, I think actually showing those clips, especially a clip of Biden and Brian Dees, is that was a better way to ask the question than the way Chuck Todd does, by basically just referencing something Janet Yellen said like 6 months ago rather than in June. I guess this is from May, so though you'll get the same answer from Brian Dees here, and I don't want to spend too much time criticizing the clip, but if by the way, I put brief summaries of all 11 of the clips down in the video description, including this, and I've also put links down to the sources of all the clips, and you'll see in the brief summary of Chuck Todd's question, I also say that he has a weird rambling follow-up question, and it's the weird rambling follow-up question that actually has this great graphic that I've been referencing all during the whole live stream. But the question he ends up asking is about, don't we need more immigrants to help us with this labor shortage and eventually truck driving shortage? And I think that was, maybe he was trying to set a trap, trying to get the Biden administration to be like pro-immigrant labor, which Brian Dees doesn't fall for. Anyway, I'll show you the whole clip. But before I do, I also noticed that I've gotten a couple more, or I got a couple more super chat contributions. Mary Wani with a Joe Quinnipiac poll result out that LiberalViewer at all-time high approval rating. I appreciate that. People enjoy the show 84% of the time. What about the other 16%? 100% of everyone, health and happiness, I guess. And Lulu Girl asking about Bannon indictment. How is Merrick Garland doing? Well, I mean, Merrick Garland at least has a Justice Department that indicted Steve Bannon. Well, I don't know if I have time to go into all of that, but maybe I'll talk about it a little more when I show the clip of John Barrasso not being able to criticize Donald Trump for saying the chance of hanging Mike Pence were common sense. And I'll talk a little more about where the Republican Party is going. And I appreciate those contributions supporting my live stream today. And but I want to get to, like I said, this is Chuck Todd asking that same question about the transitory inflation comments in a worse way than Jake Tapper started to, I think. And then you get the response I was talking about because of COVID, then weird rambling follow-up from Chuck Todd. I will discuss with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
It was literally 6 months ago on this show that the Treasury Secretary and former Fed Chair Janet Yellen said, look, inflation, it's just not an issue. 2 weeks later, when some numbers came out, that was the first time the administration started using the word transitory to say temporary. This is 6 months ago. Is it fair to say this is no longer transitory?
There's no doubt inflation is high right now. It's affecting Americans' pocketbooks. It's affecting their outlook. And that's a problem we have to deal with. But it's important that we put this in context. When the president took office, we were facing an all-out economic crisis. 18 million people were collecting unemployment benefits. 3,000 people a day were dying of COVID. And because of the actions the president has taken, we're now seeing an economic recovery that most people didn't think was possible then. Economic growth in America is outstripping any other developed country. And the unemployment rate has come down to 4.6%. That's about 2 years faster than experts projected. So the challenge we have now is how to build on the strength of that recovery while also addressing the price issues. And for us, that means three things. One, we have to finish the job on COVID. We have to return to a sense of economic normalcy by getting more workplaces COVID-free, getting more kids vaccinated so more parents feel comfortable going to work. Number two, we've got to address the supply chain issue. And the bipartisan infrastructure bill that the president will sign on Monday is going to do more to help get goods moving more cheaply and freely through the American economy than anything in half a century. And third, we have to address those costs that are the biggest pain points for the American families. Things like housing and health care and child care. That's exactly what the Build Back Better bill that the House is going to consider this week will do. And we're looking forward to working on that and getting that done as soon as we can.
Look, COVID makes a lot of sense, but the other 2 points are a bit longer term, and I understand this, that your job in some ways is to protect the long term, but there are some short-term challenges. I want to put up here, yes, we have an economic recovery, but inflation is now outstripping the wage gains. As you can see here, year over year, wages are up nearly 5%, but the inflation basically eats all of it and then some, so then we're starting to see some eating into savings. So you talk about the supply chain issue. Let's start with the labor market. We have a massive problem in the labor market. Some of it's COVID related. Some of it, though, is just we need more workers. Is it time to open the immigration door?
Well, I'm glad you made the point about wages because there's more to that statistic than meets the eye. If you look at the strong wage gains that have happened, plus the direct support that we provided to families, checks in pockets and the child tax credit, the disposable income for a typical family is actually up about 2%, even after you take into account inflation, which is why we've actually seen checking account balances go up and credit card balances come down over the course of the year. Now, that doesn't reduce the frustration anymore when somebody's going to the gas station and they see prices go up, but it does mean that we are well positioned to try to address these challenges going forward. With respect to the labor market, 500,000 jobs a month created, that's historic job growth. We want to get all Americans back to work, but it means focusing on things that actually practically are keeping people from going to work right now. COVID is a big element of this. Last month, 4 million people reported that they weren't able to fully work because either they themselves or they were dealing with a family member. The more that we can get back to a sense of normalcy, get workplaces COVID-free, get more people vaccinated, the more we're going to solve that issue. But I really want to focus on child care here, too.
I understand that, but this doesn't solve the labor. I mean, we have a truck driver problem. This isn't going to suddenly magically fix itself because...
And then he starts talking about truck drivers after that other weird rambling follow-up, like I said, where he was actually was he trying to get him to like get Biden administration to say they want more immigrants because, you know, immigration is one of the hot button issues on the right wing. And, you know, I talked about how they have the there was the little title at with the political comedy clip I showed at the beginning from America's Newsroom with like Inflation Nation. Well, they also have Biden's border crisis, and they have this whole graphic, and it's very scary. Like it shows, you know, scary people at the border all the time. Every single day there's the Biden's border crisis and Biden's tax and spending spree. That's another little chyron or like label they put on their news stories. So anyway, I don't know why I'm going off on that tangent, but speaking of spending sprees, I got another super chat contribution. Thank you for the support. Chairs Bed there with the super chat support. That's not really a chyron, but I think Brian Dees there did a good job of answering Chuck Todd's question. I don't know, and he also did a good job of picking out the wages part. Like there was so many weird weird parts to the Chuck Todd's rambling follow-up, and including it had this great graphic that I've been using all live stream, which Brian Dees like really focused in on, which was, you know, since he's a spokesperson for the administration, he did a good job on that. And then Chuck Todd, after asking about immigrants, he has this follow-up about truck drivers, and then they start talking about truck drivers. And you can watch the whole interview with a link down in the video description to the NBC News Meet the Press website. But now I want to get to the final administration official talking about the economy. This is the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, who is probably most qualified to talk about inflation, although Brian Dees is the head of the Council of Economic Advisors, so I guess he is as well. But this is kind of a tricky question from Margaret Brennan, I think, where she talks about, like, you know, you said in the second half of 2022 that this inflation should be starting to come down, and so like maybe a year from now, like November 2022, hint hint, not that, you know, anything I can think of is happening then. Midterms. But actually, by the end of this clip, you'll see Margaret Brennan does mention that there's something political about getting it under control in the next year. So Margaret Brennan knows what she's doing here. But I think Janet Yellen's answer is really good on, you know, because she's an economic expert. Unlike supposed economic expert Maria Bartiromo in the first clip, Janet Yellen, actual economic expert, talking about inflation over in this clip.
On Friday, we went to the Treasury Department here in Washington and sat down with Secretary Janet Yellen. She told us, unsurprisingly, that our economic stability depends on the pandemic. You have said that inflation is likely to be with us until the second half of next year. Are you confident that prices for the average American will be down by the time we head into next November and Election Day?
The pandemic has been calling the shots for the economy and for inflation. And if we want to get inflation down, I think continuing to make progress against the pandemic is the most important thing we can do. I think it's important to realize that the cause of this inflation is the pandemic. It led to a dramatic increase in demand for products. Households were unable to spend on services, going out to eat and traveling. They shifted as they stayed at home, worked more from home. They shifted their spending onto goods that led to a surge in the demand for products. And although the supply of products has increased in the United States and globally, not as much as demand. Americans feel confident about the job market. Quits have increased to record numbers, which is a sign that people are getting outside offers. They're seeing wage increases. That is something that didn't have to happen, and it really reflects the support that we gave to Americans to keep up their spending and make it through the pandemic. But with supply disruptions and this huge shift in demand toward products, we are seeing some broad-based price increases. We have shortages of semiconductors. That's really caused new and used car prices to rise, car production
26% year over year for used cars.
Yes.
Gasoline up 50%, eggs 12%, milk 6%, coffee 6%.
So we are seeing some big increases in
when
prices.
When does it get better? When do those spikes abate?
When the economy recovers enough from COVID that demand patterns, people go back to eating out, traveling more, spending more on services, and the demand for products, for goods, begins to go back to normal. And also, labor supply has been impacted by the pandemic. Labor force participation is down. It hasn't recovered. And I would expect that if we're successful with the pandemic to be sometime in the second half of next year, I would expect prices to go back to normal.
Because there could be a political cost to this.
Yes. Well, there's an economic cost, and the Americans feel it. And when gas rises, averages now over $3 a gallon, and some places quite a bit higher, Americans notice it, and it makes a difference. But I just think it's important to put inflation in context of an economy that is improving a lot from what we had right after the pandemic and is making progress.
So yeah, I think that is the best of the, I have the two Brian Dees clips, but I think that Janet Yellen did a better job of making the argument that the answer to my titular question for the live stream tonight, Biden economy good or bad, is actually good, despite some of the difficulties. But one of the main caveats to that is that the economy is tied very closely to what's happening with COVID. There is this possibility of a fifth wave that's happening in a lot of places in Europe right now. In fact, if you go to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, which that's where the link down in the video description under sources to Face the Nation goes to their YouTube channel, where all their segments are split. The entire program is split into segments, different videos, including the Elizabeth Palmer report from Europe this week, talking about how things are getting worse there. And a lot of times in the pandemic, Europe has gotten the problems. I think Austria was the place that was having the worst outbreak, and Europe has been sort of a harbinger of what's going to happen in the United States, and maybe there will be a fifth wave. So Janet Yellen made that point, and that might mean that the news in the economy isn't going to be good if things actually do get worse. But she also made the point about labor getting power and people having a lot more income, like disposable income went up, debt went down, especially because of the rescue plans that have been passed so that people could keep spending, and that was also passed with no Republican votes, the American Rescue Plan. And that's one of the reasons the United States is in a better position than a lot of countries coming out of the pandemic, assuming we actually are coming out of the pandemic, which, like I said, is not necessarily an accurate assumption. But anyway, those are the newsmaker clips on the main topic of Biden economy good or bad, although the next clip is the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, talking about COVID. And I just talked about how COVID may be what's controlling the economy. So in that sense, I guess this next clip fits in the main topic. And it's Vivek Murthy responding to a couple Fox News talking points, propaganda talking points in some ways that help this like right-wing partisan view of the pandemic that getting vaccinated is having a mandate where public employees, public safety employees have to be vaccinated, like cops and firefighters, people who deal with the public, where they could spread the virus and also could be victims of the virus. That is a problem where government employees have often had to have various health mandates, and you'll see Vivek Murthy answers that talking point pretty well. And then there's this whole personal freedom thing where Chris Wallace uses a clip of Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not going to go into the whole Aaron Rodgers story where he claimed to be. He was asked if he was immunized, and he said yes, or he was asked if he was vaccinated, and he said, yes, I'm immunized, which meant he went to some like homeopathic or holistic healer who gave him all sorts of like weird mixtures of stuff that immunized him against COVID, but he did not get the COVID vaccine, and he was really misleading, and then he got COVID, and went and talked to Joe Rogan, and took ivermectin, and anyway, all about the personal freedom. But I think Vivek Murthy, the reason I wanted to play this clip, and I chose this clip, is because I think Vivek Murthy had a great response on, I don't know, this is sort of a corollary to the Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, with great freedom comes great responsibility. And I'm pre-criticizing the clip, I guess, but as you watch this clip, ask yourself, who do you think has a better understanding of the balance between personal freedom and personal responsibility? Is it Aaron Rodgers or Vivek Murthy? I think Vivek Murthy gets it, and he also finds the fatal flaw in the public safety argument that Chris Wallace tries to make. And I've pre-criticized the clip, but I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Safety is the issue. How do you balance the drive for more vaccinations with the fact that police and healthcare workers in a number of cities are walking off the jobs, and now you have the Oklahoma National Guard refusing the mandate to get vaccinated?
Well, Chris, what I think is important to appreciate in the broader picture is that the vast, vast majority of people across this country, vast majority of workers, are in fact in line with and will be in compliance with the general requirements. We've already seen that in the businesses that have put these requirements in place. Many of them have achieved a greater than 95% sort of adherence, if you will, with the vaccine requirements. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. But ultimately, this is about...
Well, I mean, I just want to say, but on the other hand, there's a large percentage, thousands of Border Patrol agents who haven't been vaccinated and are threatening to leave the job. You see in police departments in big cities, healthcare workers, and as I say now, the entire Oklahoma National Guard.
So here's what's important there, Chris. I think, number one, look, I think everyone's point of view matters. And for those who are concerned about the vaccine requirements, I think it's important for them to have their questions answered, their concerns heard. But if we're concerned about the safety of the workforce, Chris, the single biggest threat to our workforce in hospitals, our police force, and other workforces has been COVID itself. The number of workers who have gotten sick, who have been quarantined and off the job as a result, who have lost their lives, is extraordinary and really heartbreaking during this pandemic. So if we want to protect our workers, Chris, these vaccine requirements will ultimately help us to advance that cause to the greatest extent that we need to.
For a lot of people, though, this comes down to personal freedom. And Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers came down, as I can see you nodding, with COVID after deciding to take alternative treatments instead of the vaccination. He spoke out this week. Take a look.
I believe strongly in bodily autonomy and the ability to make choices for your body, not to have to acquiesce to some woke culture.
Doctor, what do you say to Aaron Rodgers?
Look, I think the principle of freedom when it comes to health, but in general, is a very important one. Freedom is an important value that brought my family to this country as immigrants years ago, and it's brought so many immigrant families to this nation. It's extraordinarily important. But keep in mind, we are a community of 300 million people. We are not sole individuals entirely on our own. And in any community, sometimes our decisions do affect other people. It's why, Chris, we have speed limits on highways, because we know our decision about how fast we drive affects the safety of others. When it comes to getting vaccinated, we know that people who are unvaccinated are at higher risk of getting sick and spreading it to others, which is why in many settings, Chris, we have made the decision as a community to require vaccines in schools, for example, all across our country and in certain workplace settings. That's why these are so important here too, Chris. So while freedom is absolutely important, we also have a collective responsibility to one another when our decisions impact the health and well-being of others.
Dr. Murthy, thank you. Thanks for your time this week, and always.
So kudos to Vivek Murthy there for pointing out that more cops have died of COVID than from all the shootings. If cops were really interested in their safety, and Fox News is still carrying that talking point that all these public safety people are going to quit. That's what the head of the police officers union in New York City said that like half of the 30,000 cops in New York were going to quit because of the vaccine mandate. Turns out it was like 34 didn't go through the process. So it's ridiculous. And there's also the possibility of testing in a lot of jurisdictions. And as I said, the people who come in contact with police, firefighters, they don't have a choice in the matter. They're dealing with people who are supposed to protect and serve, and you can't protect and serve if you're going to spread COVID. And there's all sorts of new data coming out that the vaccinations need boosters. And I think that was one of the things that came up on one of the shows, talking to one of the governors. Who was it? I can't remember exactly where, but there is some. Oh, it was the governor of Colorado who wanted to get more people boosted and actually criticized the Biden administration or the CDC for having mixed messaging, and they kind of slowed down the process and narrowed who got boosters. And it seems like after 6 months, but what that means is that people are more vulnerable as the vaccines wear off, and it's important that as long as 1,000 people are dying every day and the cases are as high as they are, and the possibility of this fifth wave exists, that everybody who can gets vaccinated, that people wear masks and social distance in areas, especially indoors where COVID rates are high, and they're spiking in a lot of areas, as you saw even Fox News showed in their news summary, where of course they're blaming Biden for it, but it's much worse for the unvaccinated, and it's much worse in Republican areas, in red states, I mean, because that's where the vaccination rates are lowest. And how that's going to play out, I don't know. But anyway, that maybe that's the final clip on my main topic, because the fate of the Biden economy is kind of tied to the fate of the pandemic in the United States, and whether there's another spike that keeps disrupting economic progress. But this final clip is actually on that Republican backlash, and this is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and the co-host of that show, Jonathan Karl, has this new book coming out, Betrayal, that I haven't seen. It's not behind me here. I haven't bought it. But as part of his promotion of that book, he's letting out parts, this interview he did with Donald Trump down in Mar-a-Lago. I saw him on one of he's been doing so many interviews. He's been on like Stephen Colbert and The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. I think he was on both. And he's been on various news programs. I've seen him tell the same story over and over again. And one of the stories I saw him tell was this interview actually took place in the lobby in Mar-a-Lago. This is where the "hang Mike Pence is just common sense" comment comes from. And Jonathan Karl says that Donald Trump wanted to do the interview in the lobby in Mar-a-Lago so that like people would see the interview. And he also says after being called various names, how, enemy of the people and all the stuff Trump did talking about biased and hacks. And I can't remember exactly what he called Jonathan Karl. But after all that, when Trump was doing the interview with Jonathan Karl in the lobby at Mar-a-Lago, when people would come by and say, I'm with the great Jonathan Karl, like he was using it to like promote his image. I don't know. But so that's why the acoustics are a little bad when he talks about hang Mike Pence being common sense. But anyway, because ABC has that exclusive, Jonathan Karl being the co-host of the This Week with George Stephanopoulos program, they concentrated on that a lot. And here you can see George Stephanopoulos giving what I promised as the cross-examination runaround of the week, where he tries to get Wyoming Senator John Barrasso to condemn former President Donald Trump for saying that the hang Mike Pence chants were common sense. And he finds like every way not to answer the question. And then George Stephanopoulos just kind of gives up after about 3 minutes in the final newsmaker clip before the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for tonight. Anyway, let me know what you think, if this is the cross-examination runaround clip of the month, the year, I don't know. Well, I've shown a lot of cross-examination runaround clips, but this is a pretty good one that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Finally, I want to ask you about President Trump. As you know, John Karl, our chief Washington correspondent, had an interview with President Trump he released this week where the president seems to defend those who were saying hang Mike Pence on January 6th. Want to show it.
Were you worried about him during that siege? Were you worried about his safety?
No, I thought he was well protected, and I had heard that he was in good shape. No,
you heard those chants. That was terrible. I mean, it was,
he could have. Well, the people were very angry.
They're saying hang Mike
Because
Pence.
it's common sense. How can you, if you know a vote is fraudulent, right?
Yeah.
How can you pass on a fraudulent vote to Congress?
So he says hang Mike Pence is common sense. Can your party tolerate a leader who defends murderous chants against his own vice president?
Well, let me just say, the Republican Party is incredibly united right now, and it's because of the policies of this administration. And I think the more that the Democrats and the press becomes obsessed with President Trump, I think the better it is for the Republican Party. President Trump brings lots of energy to the party. He's an enduring force, but elections are about the future, not the past. And that's what we saw in Virginia and all across the country. And the Republican policies and the Trump policies of a strong economy and American energy, not begging Vladimir Putin to produce more oil, which is what Joe Biden is doing. Those are policies that we're going to continue to run on in the future.
So you have no problem with the president saying hang Mike Pence is common sense?
I was with Mike Pence in the Senate chamber during January 6th, and what happened was they quickly got Vice President Pence out of there, certainly a lot faster than they removed the senators. I believed he was safe the whole time. I didn't hear any of those chants. I don't believe that he did either. And Vice President Pence came back into the chamber that night and certified the election.
Well, we just played the chants. I'm asking if you believe, if you can tolerate the president saying hang Mike Pence is common sense.
It's not common sense. But there are issues of every election. I voted to certify the election, and what we have seen on this election, there are areas that needed to be looked into, like what we saw in Pennsylvania. We all want fair and free elections. That's where we need to go for the future.
But you're not going to criticize President Trump for those views?
I don't agree with President Trump on everything. I agree with him on the policies that have brought us the best economy in my lifetime, and I'm going to continue to support those policies and continuing to work to stop what Joe Biden is doing to this country, which I believe is almost irreversibly bad.
Senator Barrasso, thanks for your time this morning.
So that was pretty much every way to say, to avoid saying former President Donald Trump was wrong, to say hang Mike Pence is common sense. He said, I don't think he heard the chants. He said that I disagree with Trump on a lot of things, but I agree with him on his policies that brought us a strong economy. He said, I don't think hang Mike Pence is common sense. Bold position there, very bold. Hang Mike Pence is not common sense. That's and especially, as someone who watches the show Yellowstone, well, I guess that's Montana, not Wyoming, but they seem to, didn't I just see they cross over into Wyoming to do all their killings or whatever? That's where the train state, well, I don't know how many people watch the show Yellowstone, so I shouldn't go off on a Yellowstone thing, but anyway, you have to agree with me that was the cross-examination runaround of the week, the month, maybe not the year, because there are actually a bunch of the cross-examination runarounds, but it was kind of embarrassing because President Trump continues to be kind of embarrassing for the Republican Party, and how that turns out, well, you saw the Meet the Press news summary with that package about the rise of Trumpism in the Republican Party and how the non-Trumpists have to go, and even those who vote for, evil bipartisan infrastructure have to be hounded, and I don't know. It doesn't look good. And regarding Lulu Girl's question about the indictment of Steve Bannon, I mean, it's a good thing, except that I actually wish Congress would look more into using, it has a inherent power of contempt that doesn't have to go through the Justice Department, which hasn't been used since, I think, the 1920s or whatever, but it means they could both send the sergeant of arms or someone out to arrest someone and put them in the jail in Congress, in the basement of Congress or whatever, which apparently still exists, or fine them a certain amount every day. And the reason I think that would be better is because actually whatever Steve Bannon does, even if Steve Bannon were to decide to testify and turn over documents, he could still be prosecuted for failing to do it at the time when he should, for failing to show up on the day he was supposed to show up. That's the contempt. And he can still be prosecuted for that, but it doesn't really help get him to cooperate unless the Justice Department makes a deal with him where, okay, well, as part of your plea bargain, you have to now cooperate, and we'll by you cooperating, we'll cut time off. But the inherent contempt power of Congress would be better because it doesn't require the Justice Department, and it is something that keeps hold until the person cooperates. So it's actually more coercive in terms of getting cooperation, which is really the point, because otherwise, if Congress doesn't have subpoena power, it's not an independent one of the three branches of government. One of the things I give out to people who give $5 or $10 directly through the PayPal link or through Patreon. I can't do it through the YouTube memberships because there's no way for me to get the shipping address. But if you're a monthly patron on Patreon at $5 or above, you get this ACLU Constitution, and you get this hashtag LiberalViewer sticker on weatherproof vinyl, and through just a one-time direct PayPal contribution of $5 at the link down there, I'll send that out to only to the United States for the $5 contributions. $10 maybe internationally. But anyway, the Congress is one of the three branches of government that you'll read about here. And if Congress doesn't have a subpoena power to get members of the executive branch to come and testify and turn over documents, it's not really, it's makes it a junior branch of government. That power has to exist. And that's not even partisan. It should actually still work when the Congress and the executive are of the same party, because there should be some branch rivalry, the three branches of government. It's actually kind of sad. I give these talks on the Constitution to high school students, and one of the things I talked about was this poll showing that only 26% of Americans, I think at one point, could name the three branches of government. It's, of course, the legislative branch, the Congress, the executive branch, and then the judicial branch. Sometimes people say the presidency and then House and Senate. I saw somebody mistweeted that sometime in the last month or so, but no, those are the three branches, and Congress needs to be an independent branch. And anyway, so I think it has an inherent power of contempt that it hasn't used in a long time, that maybe after what happened in the Trump administration, it should try to revive that. That's my long answer to Lulu Girl's question there. And anyway, that's the final newsmaker clip talking about the rising violence and insanity in the Republican Party, the hang Mike Pence's common sense, and Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeting out the phone numbers of members of Congress who vote for evil bipartisan infrastructure. And anyway, before I finish the show, I did promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip, and this is from breakfast this morning, or before breakfast. First I show Sandy the dog and Dash the cat both waiting for me to give the dog food to Sandy. Dash is drinking from Sandy's water bowl, and I do a little close-up of that, and then a close-up of Sandy the dog, and then I do a little edit to a little later after I put all the dog food in a bowl, and that's where Sandy gets really excited, and that's the end of the clip that I'm going to end the show with tonight over here. And Sandy got so excited at the end there. I would have had, the clip would have gone on farther, but I hurt my back on this trip to Houston, and I was trying to follow, and my back fell, and my feet were in the frame after that. You don't want to see my bare feet, do you? No one's gonna. Isn't there some website where they put people's feet? My feet are not going to end up there. But anyway, that was But Sandy got so excited about that food there that I don't know. Anyway, that is the end of the program. I hope you appreciated the time and effort that I put in, despite I'm feeling a little bit sick and have a sore back after traveling to Houston in COVID country and Republican, no masking, no social distancing, and probably a lot of unvaccinated. The one thing is, employees seem to still be wearing masks mostly, though not 100%. It's only the working peasants have to wear the masks, not like the customers walking around, or I don't know. It's not like here in California where we're still all wearing masks indoors in businesses and social distancing. So anyway, I've talked long enough. I've gone on long enough. I'm pretty tired. I'll see you next Monday. I don't know. Maybe I have a bunch of things to do this week. I watched the closing arguments in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I watched his testimony. I didn't see much of the other evidence, but I don't know if I'll have something to say about the verdict when that comes out, if I'll have time to do that. But anyway, I will be back next Monday and every Monday for at least through 2021, especially if I keep getting support like I did with the Super Chat contributions and maybe some more of those PayPal contributions and Patreon contributions I was talking about. If you want to, when you're making the contribution, let me know what you think about switching over to Fox News bias live streams on random days, or maybe even a few edited produced videos I could premiere. That's one of the places I'm thinking of going back to, or I don't know. Anyway, I'll talk about that more next Monday and every Monday for several more weeks at least, and who knows, I might just keep doing the Sunday or Monday, the Sunday, well, I don't think I'm going to do Sundays anymore, but I could keep doing Monday Media Mix-Up, so I'll see how it goes. And anyway, I'll see you next Monday, and until then, I guess I'll just be seeing you all around the internet.